At my family barbecue, I overheard my daughter-in-law call me the plague that ruined their lives, complaining I held that money over their heads, money that covered their mortgage for 8 years. I simply repeated her words, then told her I wouldn't be ruining their lives much longer. What happened next? You won't believe it. I'm sharing my story with you now. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. Eleanor, at 62, had always found a deep, quiet satisfaction in hosting her family's annual summer barbecue. Her backyard, a patchwork of vibrant hydrangeas and a meticulously kept lawn, was transformed into a bustling hub of laughter and grilling smoke. She spent days preparing, marinating the ribs in her special sauce, perfecting her potato salad, and making sure every detail from the crisp tablecloths to the chilled lemonade was just right. Her son Daniel and his wife Chloe were always the last to arrive, a habit Eleanor had, over the years, learned to tolerate, if not entirely accept. It was a familiar rhythm, one that spoke of family, tradition, and her steadfast efforts to keep them all close. Despite Chloe's often cool demeanor, Eleanor clung to a fragile hope. She yearned for the kind of warm, easy mother-daughter bond she'd seen other women share with their daughters-in-law. She tried consistently to bridge the unspoken gaps between them, offering advice, gifts, and unwavering support, all in the quiet hope that one day Chloe would soften, that they would truly connect. This barbecue, like so many gatherings before it, was another small offering on the altar of that hope. The afternoon sun was warm on Eleanor's back as she carried a freshly mixed salad bowl from the kitchen. The kitchen door, ajar, offered a sliver of the lively backyard scene, but it was the sudden sharp edge in Chloe's voice that brought Eleanor to a halt. The voice, usually muted and polite in Eleanor's presence, now cut through the general hum of conversation, laced with an unmistakable disdain. "Honestly, these forced family gatherings are just so exhausting," Chloe declared, her tone dripping with exasperation. "We're just obligated to pretend we're one big happy family, aren't we?" Eleanor froze, the ceramic bowl cool against her palms. A hollow ache began to form in her chest. She had always prided herself on creating an inviting atmosphere, a haven where her family could feel truly at ease. To hear it described as forced felt like a direct assault on her deepest intentions. Then, Chloe's voice sharpened further, each word a venomous dart. "She's been the plague that ruined our lives, Daniel. Always hovering, always having an opinion, always interfering, and always holding that money over our heads." The words struck Eleanor like a physical blow. The plague that ruined our lives, the vivid image of her sacrifices, the endless small kindnesses, the boundless love she'd poured into her family, all shattered by Chloe's cruel assessment. But it was that money that truly stunned her, twisting the knife in her heart. The money, that phrase conjured a painful kaleidoscope of memories. The 8 years of steady, unwavering mortgage payments she had made on Daniel and Chloe's house, after they'd struggled with their initial loan. It brought back the image of Arthur, her beloved husband, 20 years gone, his face beaming as he sold his cherished classic car to help their son with the down payment, a gesture of selfless love for his new family. Those sacrifices, made out of love and a profound desire for their happiness, had now been weaponized, transformed into a burden, a form of emotional blackmail in Chloe's eyes. Slowly, deliberately, Eleanor turned. The kitchen door now swung open fully, revealing her standing there, the salad bowl still in her hands. Daniel, who had been laughing moments before, saw her first. The color drained from his face, his smile dissolving into a horrified grimace. Chloe, initially startled, recovered quickly. Her expression shifted from surprise to a defiant glare, devoid of any real shame. "The plague that ruined your lives," Eleanor repeated, her voice steady, an unnerving calm masking the violent tremor in her hands. She met Chloe's gaze directly. Her eyes, usually warm and gentle, now held a glint of steel. "The plague that ruins your lives," Eleanor continued, each word carefully articulated, "has been paying the mortgage on your house for 8 years. 8 years, Chloe. But don't worry." A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. "I won't be ruining your lives much longer." With those words hanging heavy in the air, Eleanor lowered the salad bowl to the nearest counter, placing it with such precision it sounded like a fragile crack in the silence that had fallen over the backyard. She walked through the house, past the astonished faces of her other guests, her movements deliberate and unwavering. She bypassed the living room, heading straight for the small table by the front door where she had left her purse. Her hand closed around the strap, the familiar leather a grounding presence in the swirling chaos of her emotions. She opened the door and stepped out, not looking back. The car, usually a sanctuary, felt like a pressure cooker. The moment the door clicked shut, the carefully constructed composure fractured. Hot tears streamed down her face, a torrent of grief, anger, and profound disappointment. She sobbed, deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body for what felt like an eternity. 30 minutes, the dashboard clock confirmed. 30 long minutes, during which she half expected, desperately hoped, that Daniel would come running after her, that he would explain, apologize, anything. But the front door remained stubbornly closed. No one came. When she finally pulled out of the driveway, her vision blurred by tears, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The barbecue was still in full swing. Laughter, faint but distinct, drifted from the backyard. It was as if she had simply vanished, a phantom that had briefly disturbed the peace before dissolving into thin air. Her absence meant nothing. Back in her own home, the silence was deafening, amplified by the emptiness of the rooms. Each step echoed a hollow sound, mirroring the ache in her soul. She walked past the framed photographs, each one a testament to a life built on love and sacrifice. Arthur's smiling face in a silver frame on the mantelpiece caught her eye. 20 years had passed since his death. 20 years she had spent upholding his legacy, raising their son, building a life that honored their shared values. Every decision, every sacrifice had been for family, for continuity, for love. She picked up Arthur's photograph, her thumb tracing the familiar contours of his face. "What would you do, Arthur?" she whispered, her voice raw with despair. Was I wrong? Was family first always a mistake? The question hung in the air, unanswered, heavy with the weight of a lifetime of devotion, now shattered. 3 days stretched into an agonizing eternity. The silence from Daniel and Chloe was deafening, a stark contrast to the previous weekend's festive facade. Eleanor spent those days in a fog, the words, "the plague that ruined our lives," echoing relentlessly in her mind. Her beautiful home, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a lonely monument to a life she'd poured into others, only to be deemed a burden. Her friend Maria, ever observant and kind, sent a few concerned texts. "Are you okay, Eleanor? Haven't heard from you." And later, "Thinking of you." Eleanor saw them, her heart warmed by Maria's thoughtfulness, but she simply couldn't bring herself to respond. The wound was too fresh, too raw to expose, even to a dear friend. She needed to process the depth of this betrayal on her own. On the third evening, just as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, painting her living room in hues of melancholy orange and purple, her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. A surge of relief, swiftly followed by a wave of apprehension, washed over her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and answered. "Mom," Daniel began, his voice devoid of his usual warmth, almost formal. "Chloe wants to apologize." Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. "Chloe wants to apologize. Not, 'I'm sorry, Mom,' or 'we're so sorry,' or even 'Chloe and I are sorry.'" The immediate, subtle distancing in his phrasing was not lost on her. It confirmed her deepest fear. Daniel wasn't taking responsibility for his wife's cruel words, nor for his own silence when she had been publicly humiliated in her own home. He hadn't defended her, and now he was merely relaying Chloe's supposed remorse, as if he were an impartial messenger. The hollow apology filtered through him already felt insincere. "She was just having a bad day, Mom," Daniel continued, his voice taking on a placating, almost dismissive tone. "You know how she gets when she's stressed about money? Things have been really tight lately." Eleanor's eyebrows raised, though Daniel couldn't see it. Stressed about money. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She was sitting at her dining room table, surrounded by a stack of documents she had pulled out. Mortgage statements, copies of the deed, her personal bank records. She had spent hours going through them, not out of spite, but out of a desperate need for clarity, for undeniable proof of her contributions. so that when this inevitable conversation happened, she would be armed with facts, not just raw emotion. She cleared her throat, her voice calm, deliberate, a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. Daniel, she began, using his full name, a rarity, do you remember when you and Chloe first wanted to buy that house? She paused, letting the question hang, forcing him to recall a memory that was inextricably linked to her generosity. And what did I do? There was a noticeable hesitation on Daniel's end, a dragging of feet even over the phone lines. You, you helped us with the down payment, Mom, he mumbled, his voice a shade softer, reluctant. $50,000. And? Eleanor pressed, her gaze falling on a specific document, her finger tapping it lightly. Another pause. You, you co-signed the loan. Well, that's right, Daniel, Eleanor confirmed, her voice unwavering. But it goes deeper than that. I am the primary borrower on that mortgage. The house, Daniel, is in my name. The silence on the other end was absolute, heavy with shock. Eleanor imagined his jaw dropping, his face paling. It was a detail they had conveniently overlooked, or perhaps never truly grasped, in their rush to secure their dream home with her help. And I've been making the mortgage payments every single month for the past 8 years, Eleanor continued, laying out the irrefutable truth. That's over $150,000, Daniel, not including the $50,000 I put down. Mom, you know we've been going through a rough patch, Daniel interjected, a defensive edge creeping into his voice, attempting to deflect from the staggering figure she had just presented. Things have been tough for us. Rough patch or not, Daniel, that's a substantial amount of money, Eleanor stated, unwilling to let him gloss over it. His defensiveness escalated. It's not just that, is it? It's everything, isn't it? The $4,000 for Chloe's car, when hers broke down, Leo's braces, Lily's ballet lessons for the last 3 years, my tuition for that certification course. His voice was becoming sharp, echoing Chloe's recent barbs. Are you keeping score, Mom? Is that what this is about? Eleanor felt a familiar sting, a flash of righteous anger. Keeping score, Daniel, she repeated, the question laced with incredulity. After what I heard Chloe say, after being called the plague who ruins your lives because I hold that money over your heads? No, Daniel, it's not about keeping score with dollars and cents. Her voice hardened. It's about respect, Daniel. It's about appreciation. So what? He retorted, his voice rising, now mirroring Chloe's indignation from the barbecue. We should bow down and thank you every single day for every penny, for us to feel indebted to you forever? Eleanor closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. She was transported back years to a conversation with her dear friend Brenda. Brenda, with her sharp wit and even sharper insight, had warned her after Daniel's college graduation. Eleanor, you're raising a man who thinks he's entitled to your help, not grateful for it. At the time, Eleanor had brushed it off, convinced her son knew her heart. Now, Brenda's words resonated with chilling accuracy, confirming a pattern she had unknowingly fostered. The anger in Daniel's voice softened abruptly, shifting to a familiar tone of pleading. Mom, please, we're drowning here. We need help. And just like that, the ingrained response, the automatic maternal instinct to fix, to provide, surfaced. How much? Eleanor heard herself ask, the word escaping before she could truly process it. We just need $8,000, Mom, Daniel quickly supplied, sensing her waver. Just to get us through this month. Power bills, overdue credit cards, the kids' school fees. We'll pay you back, I promise, as soon as things turn around. The promise, so familiar, so utterly empty of any past fulfillment, hung in the air. Eleanor thought of Arthur, his gentle wisdom often a compass for her. You can't pour from an empty cup, love, he used to say, referring not just to physical energy, but to emotional and financial reserves. She had poured herself dry, time and again, and what had it gotten her? Betrayal and disrespect. Daniel, she said, her voice softer now, but firm. I need some time to think about this. Time? Daniel's voice flared with indignation. What's there to think about? It's just money, Mom. Is that all we are to you now? A cost? We're your family, Mom. Your only family. His tone was a masterful blend of guilt and manipulation, aimed squarely at her deepest vulnerabilities. The emotional blackmail was potent, designed to chip away at her resolve. But something had fundamentally shifted within Eleanor. The past 3 days, the barbecue, Daniel's call, it all culminated in a quiet but powerful determination. "I need time," she repeated, her voice holding no room for argument. "Goodbye, Daniel." And with a definitive click, Eleanor hung up the phone. She sat in the silence, the receiver still clutched in her hand, exhausted but for the first time in a very long time, truly resolved. The cycle, she knew, had to be broken, and it would start with her. The morning after her terse conversation with Daniel, Eleanor found herself in the quiet solitude of her living room, surrounded by old photo albums. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, illuminating decades of family memories. Flipping through the pages, she saw countless pictures of Daniel, from a gap-toothed toddler to a confident young man, then as a husband and father. Chloe appeared in later albums, always poised, often smiling brightly in family photos. Eleanor studied these images, searching for cracks in the facade, for signs she might have missed. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. Had she been so blinded by love and the desire for a harmonious family that she'd ignored the true dynamics at play? Had the narrative of a loving, reciprocal family been nothing more than a convenient fiction, carefully constructed by Daniel and Chloe and willingly embraced by her? Later that day, seeking counsel from the one person who always saw things with unvarnished clarity, Eleanor met Brenda for coffee. Brenda listened patiently as Eleanor recounted the barbecue, the phone call, the raw sting of Chloe's words. When Eleanor finished, Brenda reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Eleanor," Brenda began, her voice soft but firm, "I knew. We all knew a little, but you didn't want to see the truth, did you?" The admission, though not entirely surprising, still landed heavily. "What do you mean, Brenda?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper. Brenda sighed. "Remember that kitchen renovation they did a few years back? The one that cost nearly $30,000? Eleanor nodded, a fresh wave of shame washing over her. "Of course, I paid for it, out of my retirement savings." "And do you remember what I said then?" Brenda continued, her eyes holding Eleanor's. "I told you it was too much, that they were taking advantage, but you just waved it off, said it was an investment in their happiness, in the family's future." The memory surfaced with painful clarity. Chloe had been masterful, presenting glossy magazine cutouts in expensive appliance catalogs, talking about dream kitchens and forever homes. Eleanor, wanting to see her son and daughter-in-law happy, had felt a creeping sense of guilt when Chloe spoke of plans that seemed beyond her means. Chloe had subtly, almost imperceptibly, made Eleanor feel as though she would be depriving them, diminishing their dream, if she couldn't fund their luxurious vision. The unspoken message was clear. A loving mother would make this sacrifice. And Eleanor, desperate to be that loving mother, had emptied a portion of her retirement to make it happen. "They never invited you over once during the renovation, did they?" Brenda probed gently. "And when was the last time they invited you over for dinner? Just because? When was the last time Daniel called you just to check on you, mom to son, not to ask for money or a favor?" Eleanor searched her memory, trying to pinpoint a single instance. A dinner invitation that wasn't a holiday or a grandchild's birthday. A casual phone call from Daniel, simply asking how she was doing. She couldn't recall one. The realization was a sharp, bitter pill. Driving home from her coffee with Brenda, Eleanor found herself taking a detour, her car automatically turning down Daniel and Chloe's street. Their opulent colonial, a stately presence behind a meticulously manicured lawn, stood bathed in the afternoon sun. The lawn, she noted, looked particularly vibrant. She remembered the landscape company's bill, always conveniently forgotten by Daniel until she stepped in. Her gaze then fell on Chloe's new SUV, gleaming in the driveway. A few months ago, Daniel had called, "Mom, Chloe really needs a more reliable car for the kids." And Eleanor, ever the rescuer, had helped finance the substantial down payment. Just as Eleanor was about to drive past, the front door opened. Chloe emerged, dressed in crisp white tennis attire, a racket bag slung over her shoulder. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a picture of carefree elegance. She embraced a friend who had just pulled up, their conversation light and animated. Eleanor watched, an icy dread creeping through her. Chloe, laughing, not a care in the world, contradicted Daniel's desperate pleas of financial stress, of being drowning in bills. The image of the plague and that money now took on an even darker hue. That evening, armed with a newfound resolve, Eleanor plunged back into her banking records. She had to know the full extent of it. She painstakingly tallied every transfer, every check, every direct payment she had made for Daniel and Chloe over the past decade. Beyond the mortgage and the kitchen, there were smaller yet significant amounts: vacations, school trips, medical bills, car repairs, even groceries on occasion. As the numbers accumulated, a staggering figure materialized on her ledger: over $300,000. This was on top of the mortgage payments she had already calculated. Over $500,000 of her hard-earned money, her retirement security, poured into their lives, their comfort, their convenience. Her heart ached with the magnitude of her misguided generosity. Her phone buzzed, vibrating on the table next to the stacks of damning evidence. It was a text from Daniel. "Mom, did you think about what we talked about? The bills are due Friday." No apology, no check-in, just a demand, a reminder of their immediate need, devoid of any consideration for her feelings or the emotional upheaval she was experiencing. The next afternoon, just as Eleanor was stepping out to run errands, there was a knock on her door. Daniel stood on her porch, a strained expression on his face, a mix of genuine concern and thinly veiled impatience. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face, though his gaze seemed to drift past her, as if searching for something else. "I've been calling. You didn't answer." Eleanor met his gaze directly, her own eyes clear and unwavering. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Or do you just need that money?" She cut straight to the chase, her voice calm, utterly devoid of emotion. Daniel flinched, caught off guard. "Well, yes, Mom, we do," he admitted, his facade crumbling slightly. "The property taxes are due next week, and Lily needs a new laptop for school. Her old one just died." The usual litany of urgent needs, a well-rehearsed script. Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. Then she asked, the words slow and deliberate, "Daniel, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for something, not to talk about Chloe, not to discuss the kids' needs. Just to see how I was doing." Daniel faltered, his mouth opened, then closed. He looked away, shifting his weight uneasily from one foot to the other. "Mom, you know we've been busy," he stammered, avoiding her gaze. "Life's just crazy right now." "Busy?" Eleanor repeated, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Too busy to check on your mother?" She paused, letting the silence stretch between them. "You don't know what I want, Daniel. You've never asked." And with that, before he could formulate another excuse or plea, Eleanor gently but firmly closed the door. She heard his frustrated sigh, the shuffle of his feet as he turned to leave. The sound, usually painful, now felt like the first decisive step in reclaiming her own life. The morning after closing the door on Daniel, Eleanor felt a quiet resolve settle over her. The emotional tumult of the past few days had given way to a steely determination. The first step was to face the full reality of her financial situation. She picked up the phone and called her bank, scheduling an immediate appointment with Ms. Davies, a senior financial advisor she had vaguely known for years. Seated across from Ms. Davies in the hushed, wood-paneled office, Eleanor felt a tremor of anxiety. Ms. Davies, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, laid out the facts. After reviewing Eleanor's accounts, she leaned forward, her expression grave. "Eleanor, your retirement savings are significantly below where they should be for someone your age, especially considering your projected expenses." She clicked through some projections on her computer. "At this rate, if nothing changes, you'll run out of savings within 5 years of retirement." The words hung in the air, a cold, hard truth. "And a major drain," Ms. Davies continued, tapping a finger on a line item, "is the consistent outgoing payment for the mortgage on Daniel's house." A knot tightened in Eleanor's stomach. She knew it, intellectually, but seeing it quantified, laid bare in charts and numbers, was chilling. Her generosity, her desire to help, had jeopardized her own future. Leaving the bank, Eleanor immediately called the mortgage company. She spoke to a representative, her voice steady as she inquired about removing her name from the loan on Daniel and Chloe's property. The answer was succinct and stark. For her name to be removed, Daniel and Chloe would either need to qualify for the loan entirely on their own or refinance the house in their names. If they couldn't or wouldn't, the house would face foreclosure. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her. It wasn't just her financial security at risk, it was their home, their children's stability. Yet, the betrayal still burned. Her next stop was the county clerk's office. She needed absolute certainty, official confirmation. After navigating the labyrinthine corridors, she found the relevant desk. A few minutes later, holding a printout of the property deed and mortgage documents, her eyes confirmed what she already suspected. Her name was indeed primarily on both. She was the legal owner, the one ultimately responsible. Daniel and Chloe were merely occupants, beneficiaries of her name and her income. As she drove away, a familiar pull directed her car towards Daniel and Chloe's neighborhood. She told herself it was just to clear her head, but deep down, she wanted to see. As she rounded the corner onto their street, a large white truck with a pool company logo was parked in their driveway. Workers moved purposefully in their backyard, a hive of activities suggesting a significant project underway. Eleanor parked a little way down the street, obscured by a line of trees, and watched. Through a gap in the meticulously trimmed hedge that separated their yard from the neighbors, she caught a glimpse of Chloe. She was standing with a man in a crisp suit, his arm gesturing towards blueprints spread out on a patio table. The sound of excited chatter and the distinct clinking of measuring tapes confirmed her fears. They were planning a pool. A beautiful, luxurious pool. A searing wave of incandescent anger washed over Eleanor. Just yesterday, Daniel had begged her for $8,000 for bills, claiming they were drowning. And here today, his wife was overseeing the installation of a lavish swimming pool. The audacity, the deceit, the blatant disregard for her sacrifices, it was almost unfathomable. The image of Chloe's carefree laughter at the barbecue, her earlier disdain for Eleanor's help, now solidified into a portrait of callous exploitation. She pulled out her phone and called David, a trusted friend and a real estate attorney. David listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with a question, his voice calm and reassuring. "Eleanor," he finally said, "you have significant rights here. As the primary name on the deed and mortgage, you are the legal owner. You also bear the full liability. You essentially have three options. You can continue making the payments and allow them to live there. You can force them to refinance the loan into their names, or you can force a sale of the property." Each option presented a difficult path, but for the first time, Eleanor felt a flicker of power. She wasn't helpless. Later, as Eleanor was still processing David's advice, her phone buzzed again. It was Daniel. "Mom, Chloe is really stressed. The bills are piling up. We really need your help by Friday." The text message was a stark, brutal contrast to the scene she had just witnessed in their backyard. Chloe's stress clearly wasn't preventing her from embarking on an extravagant new project. Eleanor swallowed, her heart hardening further. She decided to make one last cautious inquiry. She called Maria, her friend who had sent the concerned texts. After some general pleasantries, Eleanor casually steered the conversation. "Maria, have you heard anything from Daniel and Chloe lately? About anything new they might be doing?" Maria hesitated, a slight pause that spoke volumes. "Well, actually, yes," Maria finally admitted, her voice a little reluctant. "I ran into Chloe at the grocery store, and she was just buzzing. She said they put down a $15,000 deposit on a pool last week. She was so excited about it." $15,000, a down payment, while Daniel was begging for $8,000 for bills. Eleanor felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The depth of their deception was staggering. Then Maria dropped the bombshell. "Oh, and Chloe mentioned it was an early anniversary present from you, Eleanor. A surprise for Daniel? Isn't that sweet?" Eleanor stared blankly at the wall, the phone still pressed to her ear. "An early anniversary present from you." The magnitude of their lies, the sheer audacity of it all, crushed her. This wasn't just casual borrowing or financial mismanagement. This was a systematic, calculated pattern of deception and emotional manipulation designed to extract every possible dollar from her. They had not only taken her money but had also used her name to craft a narrative of their own lavish spending, a twisted tribute to her generosity. The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave. She had been the victim of sustained financial abuse. The humiliation, the anger, the profound sense of betrayal, it all coalesced into a fierce, unwavering resolve. She returned to her computer, opening a new spreadsheet. This time, she wasn't just listing numbers. She was building a case. Every payment, every gift, every loan, every single instance of her financial support over the past decade was meticulously documented, dated, and categorized. The column for purpose was particularly telling. Down payment, kitchen renovation, car, braces, laptop, and now pool. The spreadsheet grew, a damning indictment of their exploitation. As the last entry was made, Eleanor felt a quiet strength replace her despair. She had all the evidence she needed. The next step was action. With a determined breath, she scheduled 2 new appointments, one with a mortgage specialist and another with a real estate agent. The time for being a plague was over. The time for reclaiming her life had begun. A week later, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. Spread before her was an organized array of documents, bank statements, mortgage papers, the meticulously compiled spreadsheet, and printouts from the county clerk's office. She had spent the last 7 days preparing, not just mentally, but logistically, for this inevitable confrontation. She was calm, centered, and unequivocally ready. A sharp knock on the front door announced their arrival. Daniel and Chloe stood on her porch, their faces etched with agitation. Chloe's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, a defiant posture, while Daniel clutched his phone, his thumb nervously scrolling. "Mom, you haven't been answering our calls or texts," Daniel began, his voice a mix of frustration and something akin to accusation. "What's going on?" Eleanor simply stepped aside, gesturing them in without a word. She could feel the tension radiating from them, an unspoken panic. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that their agitation stemmed not from concern for her, but from their own mounting financial woes. They settled, somewhat awkwardly, in the living room. Daniel couldn't maintain eye contact, while Chloe's gaze darted around the familiar room as if searching for an escape. "Mom, we're in serious trouble," Daniel blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. "The bank is threatening to foreclose." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture that conveyed a world of skepticism. "Which bank, Daniel?" she asked, her voice even. "The mortgage on your house is with Summit Financial, and I have made every single payment on time, without fail, for the past 8 years. Daniel visibly deflated, caught in his own lie. "Not the mortgage, Mom," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our credit cards. They're all maxed out. We owe over $30,000. Chloe, sensing the shift in the conversation, seized the moment. She uncrossed her arms, attempting a softer demeanor. "Eleanor, about the barbecue," she began, her tone carefully modulated. "I truly am sorry. Things have just been so stressful lately, with all the bills. I say things I don't mean when I'm stressed." The apology felt hollow, a performance rather than genuine remorse. Eleanor looked directly at Chloe, her gaze unwavering. "Like when you told Maria that the new swimming pool was an early anniversary present from me?" The color drained from Chloe's face, leaving her ashen. She stammered, speechless, her careful composure shattering. Daniel, however, looked genuinely confused. "What swimming pool, Mom?" he asked, turning to Chloe, his brow furrowed. Eleanor didn't wait for Chloe to respond. "The swimming pool you and Chloe put a $15,000 down payment on last week," she stated calmly, her voice cutting through the suddenly thick air. Daniel's head snapped towards Chloe, his face a mask of shock and anger. "A $15,000 down payment? Chloe, what is she talking about?" Chloe cornered, glared at Eleanor, then snapped at Daniel. "We deserved something nice for once, Daniel. We're always struggling. You know that?" "Enough," Eleanor said, her voice rising slightly, cutting through their nascent argument like a sharp knife. "Sit down, both of you." Her tone brooked no argument. They complied, subdued. Eleanor reached for the meticulously organized folder. She opened it, revealing the spreadsheet, the bank statements, The legal documents. For years, she began, her voice calm but firm. I have poured my life, my love, and my money into this family. In the past 10 years, I have given you both over $300,000, not including the $150,000 I've paid on your mortgage. She slid the spreadsheet across the table toward them, its columns a stark, undeniable record of her generosity and their exploitation. She watched their eyes scan the numbers. Daniel's growing wide with disbelief, Chloe's narrowing with resentment. This ends now, Eleanor declared, her voice resonating with finality. She then slid another document across the table. It was a letter from Summit Financial. I've made the final mortgage payment on your house, she announced. Their eyes widened. Daniel looked utterly bewildered. The final payment? Mom, what are you talking about? And Eleanor continued, ignoring their confusion. I've also filed the necessary paperwork to put the house on the market. She paused, letting the words sink in. As the primary owner, I have that right. Chloe exploded, jumping to her feet. You can't do that. It's our house, our home, she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. Actually, Chloe, Eleanor corrected her, meeting her angry gaze with a cool, steady one. It's primarily my house, and you and Daniel have been living in it, rent-free for 8 years, courtesy of me. Daniel, his face pale, rose slowly. Mom, please, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Where would we live? What about the kids? That, Daniel, Eleanor stated firmly, is for you to figure out. You're 40 years old. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet, bought your own house, and took responsibility for your own family. Chloe, still fuming, hissed, You cold-hearted witch! After everything we've done for you. Eleanor looked at Chloe, a mirthless smile touching her lips. Everything you have done for me, Chloe. Please enlighten me. Name one thing. Chloe sputtered, unable to come up with a single genuine act of reciprocity. I'm not abandoning you, Eleanor clarified, her voice softening slightly, though her resolve remained unbroken. I'm refusing to enable you anymore. She looked from Chloe to Daniel, her eyes holding a deep sadness. The comment at the barbecue, Chloe, was just the final straw. It was after years of disrespect, of taking, of expecting, and of systematic financial abuse. It simply made me realize what I had known in my heart, but refused to acknowledge. Eleanor then outlined the terms, pragmatic and fair. When the house sells, you will receive 20% of the net proceeds. That will be enough for a deposit and your first month's rent on a new place. The remaining 80% will go directly into my retirement savings. Chloe, unable to contain her fury, slammed her hand on the table, sending the documents scattering. You'll regret this, Eleanor, she screamed, storming out of the kitchen and out the front door, slamming it behind her. Eleanor watched her go, her gaze unwavering. I'd rather be alone than be used, she murmured, loud enough for Daniel to hear. Daniel stood, paralyzed, torn between his wife's rage and his mother's undeniable authority. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. Eleanor simply looked at her son, her heart aching, but her resolve unyielding. It's time to grow up, Daniel, she said, her voice gentle but firm, for both our sakes. 1 year later, Eleanor stood on the weathered deck of her new coastal cottage, the salt breeze whispering secrets through her silver hair. The swan, a molten orb, dipped gracefully below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples. The rhythmic crash of waves against the shore was a soothing balm, a stark contrast to the turbulent echoes of the past. This place, this new life, was a testament to her courage. The past year had been in many ways harder than grieving Arthur's death. That loss, though profound, had been clean, an unavoidable act of fate. This, however, was a self-imposed amputation, a painful severing of long-held illusions and unhealthy attachments. She had spent 12 months learning to be simply Eleanor Vance, stripped of her previous roles as a wife, a perpetually giving mother, and a financial safety net. It was a journey of rediscovery, a challenging but ultimately liberating path. Her old house, the one filled with memories of Arthur and Daniel's childhood, had sold quickly, the proceeds bolstering her depleted retirement savings. With careful planning, she had found this peaceful cottage, a small haven nestled on the edge of the sea. It was close enough to her true friends, like Brenda, for comfort and companionship, yet far enough to provide the fresh start she desperately needed. Just yesterday, Brenda had joined her for coffee on the deck, sharing quiet laughter and comforting silences. "Have you heard from Daniel?" Brenda had asked, her voice gentle, knowing the delicate nature of the question. Eleanor had nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. "He called yesterday, actually. After 3 months of angry silence, he's finally talking again." She recounted the details to Brenda, the raw edges of the past now softened by time and perspective. Daniel and Chloe had indeed separated. Without Eleanor's relentless financial infusions, Chloe's extravagant spending habits had proven unsustainable, plunging them into a deeper financial hole than ever before. The dream of the swimming pool had never materialized. Daniel, now living in a modest apartment, was working 2 jobs, learning the hard lessons of self-sufficiency. He had called Eleanor not for money but to apologize, repeatedly, his voice tinged with a humility she hadn't heard in years. He confessed to his own blindness, his regret for allowing Chloe's disrespect, and his dawning realization of her sacrifices. "I've accepted his visit this weekend," Eleanor told Brenda, a cautious optimism in her tone. "But I've made it clear we're not going back to the old dynamics. This time, it's on my terms." Brenda had simply squeezed her hand, her eyes conveying her unwavering support and quiet pride. In the solitude of her new life, Eleanor had rediscovered forgotten passions. She had picked up her paintbrushes, finding solace and expression in vibrant colors and sweeping landscapes. She had joined a local book club, forging new friendships with women who knew her only as Eleanor, a woman with a quick wit and a kind smile, free from the weight of her past. Her financial security, once precariously balanced, was now restored, allowing her to look forward to her golden years on my own terms, free from the constant worry of depletion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Looking forward to this weekend, Mom. I have some good news to share." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, as she typed back a short, warm reply. Their relationship was slowly, painfully, rebuilding itself on a foundation of honesty and balance. Daniel now called seeking advice, sharing his struggles and small victories, but never, ever asking for money. Chloe, however, still refused to speak to Eleanor. The calls and texts from Eleanor remained unanswered. It was a fact Eleanor had come to terms with. Some relationships, she realized, simply weren't salvageable, and clinging to them only prolonged the pain. She had chosen peace over pretense. Stepping back inside her cozy cottage, Eleanor surveyed her space. It was decorated entirely to her own preferences. Soft, coastal hues, comfortable furniture, and artwork that spoke to her soul. On a small table nestled amongst seashells and smooth stones collected from the beach, stood Arthur's photograph. Next to it, she had placed a new one, a recent selfie of her and Daniel, both of them with tentative, cautious smiles, a fragile hope shimmering between them. She caught her reflection in the window overlooking the now darkening sea. She saw an older woman, yes, with lines etched by joy and heartbreak, but also with a quiet strength in her eyes, a hard-won wisdom that had replaced the former weariness. Eleanor whispered to her reflection, the words a soft vow to herself and to the memory of the woman she once was. "You did it. You built a house for yourself, not for anyone else. And this house, this life, was finally truly mine."